maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Your official response was that it was the firefighters. My question is, it was pretty clear that you meant the building, and if it was the firefighters, they already are outside the building by 12 because the water lines were broken.
Ask the question.
And the fire chief that you said you spoke to, Fire Chief Nagro, denies talking to you on that day of 9/11. Can you answer those questions and address the theories against you?
I suggest, for everybody's consideration, that we all look at the thousands of pages of testimony that have been rendered in the many years since 9/11, and let's use today's session for some of this.
Are you aware of testimony of bombs in the building before the building collapsed, sir? Are you aware of that testimony? Sir, there's testimony by Barry Jennings. Sir, you don't have to touch me. Listen, I'll walk away. All I'm asking is a question. I don't have to be kicked out. It's a legitimate question. You don't have to put your hands on me. But all I'm saying is, no, I'm not. I'm here asking. The question was not answered. That's why I have a grievance. Okay. Larry Silverstein was told not to come into work. That's why him, his daughter, and his son never showed up to work on 9/11. He put an insurance policy on the buildings. Reporters, do your job, please. Ask some questions.
All right. Spoiler alert: they never really started to ask real questions after that. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Rudkowski here of WeAreChange.org, here on what is mostly a very somber day, the 21-year anniversary of a day that will live in infamy, at least especially for me being a New Yorker. Lots of important issues and things to talk about today, especially when it comes to such a critical event that sadly a lot of people have forgotten about, but some politicians like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are using for their own benefit, releasing absolutely absurd, mind-boggling statements today that should have everyone concerned, as of course they're using this tragic event as a way to politically attack their opponents. We're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more. Lots of other international news happening today. Lots of developments in Ukraine, the Netherlands. We're going to be doing our best to talk about that, plus a lot more. But before we do, the clip that we played in the beginning of this video is, of course, by me. That was me a couple years ago talking to, of course, Lucky Larry, the man who, of course, bought the Twin Towers and very conveniently, right before those tragic events, set up a huge insurance policy for himself that paid him out in massive lump sums and has yet to still clearly give a definitive answer to some serious questions that a lot of family members have about his comments and his actions on that day. The video is still on our YouTube channel, and very coincidentally, after this confrontation with me and Lucky Larry, I met William Rodriguez, a national hero, an individual who risked his own life, was one of the last people out of the Twin Towers because he stayed behind and he was literally opening up doors so people could escape. Hundreds, if not thousands of lives were saved because of this selfless hero, who I proudly call a friend, who I literally met right after this confrontation. He gave me an interview that is also available in that specific video. All of that, plus a lot more, all available to you on, of course, our YouTube channel. Click the link down below to watch the full video after this one to get a full perspective about what is really going on. As, of course, this was not our first confrontation with Lucky Larry, as we have confronted him on numerous occasions, asking this question very poignantly, and to always be met with security guards trying to rough us up or police officers trying to set us up, which is the cost we have been paying for simply, asking questions. Lots of crazy stuff transpired, and of course, we have created a full-on playlist of all of our interviews with family members, survivors, rescue workers, all of our confrontations with the heads of the 9/11 Commission, with politicians, with Donald Rumsfeld, with individuals like Ron Paul, with celebrities, with investigative journalists, with researchers. And truly, if there ever was a time to go deep diving and go down the rabbit hole, this would be it. Check out our playlist. We literally have 144 videos related to this that you could scroll through and pick out and truly be surprised at the huge amount of effort we put in when it came to, of course, helping the 9/11 victims' family members, the rescue workers, and survivors find answers that the government was never willing to answer and give them. And again, 9/11 was something that personally impacted me in many different ways. There's many people that I know that have passed away after the event because they were rescue workers, they were firefighters, they were police officers, there was members of the military that went inside of that building, that rescued people, that tried to help people afterwards, and the government came out and then told them the air was safe to breathe when they knew it wasn't. The EPA lied, doctored documents, along with the White House, specifically Condoleezza Rice and George W. Bush, literally came out and said, yeah, hey, there's a bunch of asbestos there. Hey, there's a bunch of really horrible, horrendous chemicals in there that will create diseases that doctors won't even be able to classify, but we're just going to edit all that out, give this script to the corporate media. The corporate media regurgitated it without even questioning it, and it led to a situation where, according to many estimates, more people have died because of the government's lies after 9/11 than the actual events of 9/11. Now, I'm not trying to compare any tragedies here at all, but being here inside of New York City on that tragic day, seeing the plume of smoke cover the place that I lived in, covered my family's car where you could literally write your name like if it was snow. But it was the ashes, it was the asbestos, it was that toxic dust that filled the city. Hearing the panic that there were still 25 planes loose, having bomb threats being called in at my school, having so much panic and fear being left to the whims of the corporate media that was just regurgitating the worst amount of fear, the worst amount of trauma possible. This has personally affected me, and whether it affected you or not, we have to understand that this has still been a very pivotal event that we know very little about. There was individuals on Wall Street that literally shorted stocks that greatly benefited them, essentially predicting this crisis. There was video footage, photos, and surveillance cameras confiscated around the surrounding area, especially in the Pentagon. There was politicians like Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco that gave Kamala Harris her start, that openly talked about how they were warned not to travel on that specific day, canceling their flights on that specific day. We're going to get to Kamala in just a little bit. There were CIA officials intervening at embassies and consulates, approving their visas when they were initially denied because of possible terrorist links, and then some of the hijackers stayed with FBI informants, and that is just some of the information that again, hasn't been officially answered to, that we still don't know exactly what happened. And of course, I could keep going. There has been documentaries that I worked on, that I've been a part of, that have been asking these very important questions for many years now. And it's important to note that the government is still hiding information about what actually happened on that specific day. But the further we move away from it, sadly, the more people forget about it, as highlighted by a recent video by the Young Americans Foundation that interviewed college students about 9/11, and this is some of the things that they had to say.
Do you know why they attacked us? Like, what was their reasoning for attacking us?
I don't know necessarily the reason. I mean, they're just considered a terrorist group. I guess that's all we really have on that.
Now, the reason why this event was important is because it ushered into a new project for an American century that, of course, straight out came from a neoconservative think tank that has pushed America forward towards a path that has been eviscerating personal liberties, freedom, and financial abilities of individuals to have any kind of prosperous or peaceful life. And in my opinion, 9/11 marks the day where all of that has been steeply declining ever since. As, of course, these events weren't only used as a way to start foreign endeavors and conflicts that only created more terrorism rather than, of course, stopping it, creating more havoc, creating more destruction, creating more war rather than the fake notions of some kind of democracy, faker as, of course, the WMDs that were never there, but created a climate that justified a small ruling establishment within Washington, D.C. to commit horrible horrors on the world, all in the name of 9/11. Internationally, the U.S. presence was felt around the world, especially when it came to the indefinite detention, torture of individuals violating the rules of law, the Geneva Convention, and many other international laws, to the point where even many Americans, including an American citizen, were executed by the President of the United States all fighting this fictitious war of terror that fostered and grew more terror. Along with it came not only the destruction of many countries, of many lives, but also our own soldiers that were sent there, told a lie, given a rifle, only to see the lives that they sacrificed, the trillions of dollars invested, literally go into the hands of their enemies months ago, all under the failed leadership of the Biden administration that, of course, right now is exploiting this tragic event of 9/11 for their own personal and political gains. This as Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, on ground zero in New York City today claimed that, quote, domestic threats to democracies should be treated the same as foreign terrorists. Now, who does Kamala Harris view as domestic threats to democracy? Well, this Sunday on a TV interview, she also reiterated that Trump supporters are specifically threats to democracy. Yes, on the same day, she goes on television and says that Trump supporters are threats to democracy. She says threats to democracy should be treated the same as foreign terrorists. Now, how are foreign terrorists treated under the war on terror? Well, they had their basic human rights stripped away from them. They were indefinitely detained. They were tortured. They were executed without a judge, jury, or trial, as there are many accounts of individuals snitching out their neighbors in Afghanistan because they didn't like them, receiving reward money from the U.S. government, and sending innocent goat herders who had grievances with their neighbor to CIA rendition torture camps in Egypt. There was also torture camps in Poland and in many other places that, of course, the U.S. intelligence surveillance state was able to skirt the law and absolutely violate basic human rights. And what Kamala Harris is saying here is a grave, dangerous escalation that, of course, should be taken very seriously, as she is saying, essentially, Trump supporters should have their due process taken away, their rights stripped away, taken in the middle of the night because their neighbors didn't like them or snitched on them, have them tortured or murdered while being indefinitely detained because they believed in the wrong political ideas that Kamala Harris doesn't like. It's also important to note here that Kamala Harris previously used 9/11, comparing it to, of course, January 6th, and her hyperbolic, sensationalistic statements cannot be understated here. And for her to use this day, at this specific stage, not to talk about the victims, not to talk about the rescue workers, not to talk about the survivors, not to talk about the tragedy of that day, but to try to politicize this event, to go after people who think different political ideas than her, is absolutely disgusting. And it's not far from what the President of the United States just did himself, as of course he used his 9/11 speech in Washington, D.C. to also politicize this event, telling Americans that they, quote, owe it to terror victims to, quote, stand up for democracy. This, as of course he has been using that PR weaponized buzzword just very recently, branding Trump supporters as a threat to democracy. What's the Biden administration doing, especially with their politicization of the national security state, especially with their raids that they just conducted on the former president of the United States that is set to be the competitor against the current president? What are they doing, as we're hearing that there was over a dozen raids on Trump supporters nationwide? What is this administration doing? Well, they are doing what I think they're accusing everyone else of doing, and that is threatening, quote, democracy. And of course, it's also worth noting, we don't live under a democracy. We live under a democratic republic. The republic part they like to leave out, but this over-politicization, this use of the national security state that was supposed to go after the terrorists of 9/11, but now is going after Republicans and Trump supporters, is something that even a victim's family member had too much of, as even one of the family members that lost a loved one on that day came out today on a speech when he was calling out the names of his loved ones that he lost, and he said this very important message that I think more Americans need to hear more than ever.
It took a tragedy to create this new family. And I want to remind everyone over there, our politicians and elected leaders surrounded by a border right now, it took a tragedy to unite our country. Back then, no one cared if you were a Republican, Democrat, age, gender, race, ethnicity. We were united. It took a tragedy to unite us. And I want to remind all of you there, it should not take another tragedy to unite our nation. Because if I have to stand at this podium again or another podium for another event because of lives lost, because of dereliction of duty, it's gonna hurt. Just like it hurts me. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm going to continue doing this until the day that I die, and I'm joined with my family up there. God bless America. Thank you.
And from my point of view, their election of duty is at least the bare minimum here. And especially the bare minimum of what happened on that specific day. But I think this young man's message, especially to these bordered off politicians that have been using their seat of power to punish and to hurt people because of their political ideas and speech. This speech, I think reverberated with a lot of Americans that are sick of the two-party duopoly, sick of the current political establishment, and sick of the politicization and the bifurcation of our society that's happening right now within the political class against everyone else. And seeing this transition of America is not a pleasant one, but it's one that we've been warning about and trying to stop for a very long time. As of course on this independent media organization, we were warning that the powers that the Republicans were giving themselves would soon be turned inwards against the American people. And now the political party that literally created this bloated national security state that, of course, eviscerated the civil liberties in this country is now being used against the same party that, of course, started it. And now, U.S. domestic intelligence agencies are spying on American citizens, intervening and setting their teeth on American people, family members who are going to school boards that are concerned about the activities like the one that you're seeing right in front of us right now, to the point where the FBI is mobilized against school board members, to the point where everything is track traced and databased, to the point where they go around shutting down your small businesses, locking you down in your cities, and now raiding the homes of political opponents and their supporters because they dare to question the central authority that they have granted themselves in the larger abuse of power that is continuing since 9/11. And in my opinion, we have definitely crossed the Rubicon, have gone out and created a situation where now, as we were warning you many years ago, the war on terror has been turned inwards into the war on the American people. And that to me is absolutely sad and tragic. And as we remember 9/11, we should remember the ignorance and the lack of information that got us here and what we could do to try to prevent the further decline of civil liberties, personal freedoms, and the ability of Americans to live their life as free and prosperous as possible. Let's not also forget that on this date, September 11th, it's not the only coup that happened against a people and its population that, of course, led to horrible consequences. So yeah, that's my personal point of view. That's my opinion. It's been a long 21 years. If you thought this video was important, if you liked this message, you got to support it. You have to share it with your friends and family members. There's something really weird happening to our YouTube channel. It's probably going to get a lot more weirder after this video, but if you want to support us and the many years of work that we put into this, you can on wearechange.org/donate. There's many different ways you could become involved. And if you like it, you support it. You don't have to. You disagreed with me, you thought I got something wrong, let me know down in the comment section below what you thought that was. I love constructive criticism. I love being able to hear different perspectives and different points of views that, of course, I wouldn't naturally hear. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys sharing these videos, supporting me. This is all grassroots. This is all funded because of you. And this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.